I am going to do my best to explain schizophrenia at about a freshman in college level. Let's lock in. First, you have to start with normal. Here's a cut sideways. I want you to picture we're slicing my brain like this and looking at it from the side. It's called a sagittal view. The sagittal view, we can appreciate a couple things. Here, this is your prefrontal cortex. This is where you do all the thinky think. Around this area is your limbic system. That regulates a lot of emotions, fear response, affect, things like that. And down here is your brainstem, the most primal part of your brain, the part that developed first. And this area right here is called your ventral tegmental area. This is super important. The VTA is basically the epicenter of all of your dopamine neurons. Dopamine is commonly thought of as just the pleasure drug. I would get flayed alive by neuroscientists if I told that to you. So I need to tell you it does a lot of other things. This is a huge oversimplification. It plays roles in wakefulness, cognition, emotional regulation, fear, and pleasure. So basically, a bunch of dopamine sits right here in the VTA above your pons, and it sends all these tracks out into your brain, all the different regions that need dopamine. One of the regions is the limbic system. So you send out dopamine here and it helps regulate your emotions in the limbic system. It also goes out into your prefrontal cortex. This is called the mesocortical pathway. Meso just means middle. So like the midbrain, it's in the middle. So if we go from the middle to the limbic system, that's the mesolimbic pathway. Wow, so easy. And if we go from the middle to the cortex, that's the mesocortical pathway. For reference, this is what the cortex looks like. It's all the gray matter on the outside of your brain. This is the white matter on the inside. Notice how I colored it to make it gray so you could see the difference. And this is a cut sideways to your head. So it's like I went ka-cha like this, and then we looked at a slice on the front. That's called the coronal view. Side note, seizures are a cortical process. That's when you have short circuits and firing way out here. See how close the cortex is to your skull? That's why we can just put wires right out here to see where the seizures happen. Really hard to see stuff inside, deep in the brain, because it just gets disrupted by all the other signals. Okay, back to what happens in schizophrenia. First of all, we don't exactly know why this occurs, but we think it has something to do with NMDA up here in this region. So in the pyramidal cortex, there are some neurons that innervate the ventral tegmentum. These neurons are messed up. They're unable to control themselves. Some of them become hyperactive because for whatever reason, due to their DNA, the receptors are faulty. So some of these lead to hyperstimulation of nuclei in the ventral tegmentum. This causes overstimulation of pathways like the mesolimbic pathway, so you get a bunch of signals coming through here, the mesolimbic pathway. That's no good. But then turns out you actually overstimulate some of the inhibitory neurons here, and you get to understimulation of the mesocortical pathway. When you have overstimulation of these pathways, you get under hypoactivity of the thinky think, and you get overactivity of the emotional fear center. When this pathway becomes hyperactive and this limbic system is going crazy, you start to think other things in the world relate to you that don't. You're constantly afraid, and you start to hallucinate. You start to hear voices. This is how that's mediated. It's actually through this dopamine system. And then when this becomes underregulated, you start to lose your ability to organize your thoughts. You can't be as linear. You're not as rational as you were before. This is a nasty combination because not only are you perceiving external stimuli that aren't there, you're actively losing your ability to interact with it. And as this pathway starts to come down, you also lose your expression. The mesocortical pathway, when it's deactivated, causes a flattening of the affect. So it looks like this. People become completely emotionless. This also causes them to lose insight. And so then they have no idea what's reality and what's not. The way we treat schizophrenia is we just give medications that block dopamine, specifically the D2 receptor. So all we can really do is try to block dopamine in this pathway. And then the hallucinations start to chill out a little bit. But the problem is this has too little dopamine, and we don't help it at all over here. We're okay at stopping the overactive parts of schizophrenia, and we don't do much to help the underactive parts. That's called the positive symptoms overactive and negative symptoms underactive. For some people, if they get started on medications early enough, there's some damage that occurs. There's hyperstimulation and inflammatory damage that happens from these neurons firing all the time. If you can salvage that, the rest of the brain starts to heal around here, and they can recover function of their negative symptoms. But if you spend a lot of time in psychosis, your brain suffers more damage, unfortunately. Okay, that was the neurobiological perspective. Now let's talk about how does this fire in the mesolimbic pathway actually manifest into what people perceive in the world. Some people think schizophrenia is primarily a breakdown of time. Some people think it's an issue with object relations. There's a lot of different theories around this. This is not scientifically backed. It's just the model I use to understand things. Basically, if you're a computer and you're interpreting things in your environment, you're constantly registered things with time, and you're looking at an object and saying, how's that object related to its environment? Like if this pen, if I drop it, it's going to follow the rules of gravity within a certain time frame. Hence, this triangle, time, object, rules of existence. It turns out it takes a lot of cognitive processing to be constantly making sense of all those things as they interact in your environment. And that cognitive processing is registered within the limbic system to some extent, or at least is thrown off when the limbic system is hyperactive. Let's say you're driving at night and you turn on your blinker to turn on a street. Let's say you do that, and half a second later, the car behind you turns on their blinker. Could you reasonably think they were following you? I did an action, and the car behind me seemingly responded to that action. If somebody wanted to follow me, they would logically follow the same path of travel that I was doing, which means they would have to turn the same direction as me. And if they do that in response to things that I do within a timely fashion, me being in this car, you could reasonably conclude that someone's following me if they turn on their blinker about half a second after I turn on my blinker. Now, obviously, this is a fearful interpretation of this situation. So if I'm an anxious person, or if I'm just on edge for whatever reason, I may interpret that based on this kind of neutral situation. Now, let's take the same scenario, but let's say time no longer matters in this equation. It's just the rule of putting your blinker on in the same direction as me and the object of me turning on my blinker. This means that at any point, if the car behind me turns on their blinker after I turn on my blinker, I may assume that they're following me. I will perceive them to be following me because I'm no longer allowed to include time in how I process my environment. So that means I could turn on my blinker, and 30 seconds later, they could turn on their blinker and be like, they're following me. I know they're following me. But time doesn't just go backwards. Time also goes forwards. So what if they turn on their blinker before I turn on my blinker, and now I think they're following me, and how do they know I was going to turn? And so that's really going to freak me out. And the other thing is, remember how I said this system up here moderates fear? The amygdala is a part of your limbic system right in this region. So you're always on edge while all this stuff is happening. So your breakdown of interpreting the logical consequences of your environment is compromised. And you're freaking out the whole time. So everything you see, you're going to perceive as attacking you. And you have no concept of relating it to you. So things are happening in anticipation. You can't reason yourself out of it. They turned on their blinker before me. Obviously, they didn't know I was going to do that. No, I can't. That's not an equation anymore. It's breaking down. This triangle is literally fracturing. That's where schizophrenia comes from, in my opinion. Schizo means to fracture, and phrenia is just the mind. It's the fracturing of the mind. Okay, let's do one more example. Let's say time and object are preserved, but rules of existence are broken down. So the rules of things no longer need to make sense. So if I no longer have any bearing on logical rules in my environment, I could see a barista at the coffee shop turn a dial at the same time my computer started to malfunction. And I could think, that barista is causing my computer to malfunction. And remember, I'm freaking out this whole time. My sympathetic fight or flight is on overdrive this entire time. So if I think that barista is controlling my computer malfunctioning while I'm in the coffee shop, I may think she's messing with me somehow. So I'm a rational, logical person trying to figure out why I know this barista is messing with me. A reasonable person would come to the conclusion that there's some kind of omniscient organization or being that is causing all these things that are happening in their environment. Can you think of any omniscient organizations that a reasonable person would think about? Usually with 3 letters, the CIA or the FBI. That's why the CIA and the FBI are such common themes in schizophrenia, because they're perceiving these delusions around them. They're perceiving these ideas of reference that don't make sense, and they're like, what could it possibly be? And when they ration through it, they come to the conclusion that it's the FBI. So now you have somebody walking down the street. They think all these things are related to them when they're not. They have no idea where this is coming from, and they're freaking out the entire time. Right? But then they see somebody on the street, and they think, oh my God, they're part of the group. Like, they've been watching me, I know it, and then they tell them, like, get away from me, or they yell at them or something, and they're freaked out, and they're suffering, and then we see them, and we're scared too, because this is a scary experience for everybody involved. So some people at the end of the video I made about schizophrenia said, it's absolutely a scary experience to see someone going through this, especially if they confront you. And I agree. Like, I don't want to take that away. It's a scary experience for anyone involved in psychosis, those who have to witness it and those that have to experience it. I think where we draw the line is not imitating them and posting it online. It's just like any other illness that somebody's dealing with. It just happens to be neurologic and based in these neurotransmitters that we can't easily see under a microscope.